Welcome to the Encinitas Chamber Chat Live podcast. I'm Carol Knight with the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce. With the help from my talented friends at Max Deluxe, we will showcase the many aspects and unique qualities of the Encinitas community. Whether it be focusing on local business owners, advice from experts, or highlighting some of the local gems Encinitas has to offer, we hope you'll find this podcast informational and entertaining. As Earth Month is coming to a close, we thought it would be a good idea to have what I think is one of the underrated but most impactful organizations in our community on this podcast today. So I'm thrilled and so excited to have with me Javier Guerrero, President and CEO of Coastal Roots Farms. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I must say I'm humbled to have you on the podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be here.
Always, and very happy to be a member of the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce.
Happy to have you. So Coastal Roots Farm has been around about 10 years. I don't know if a lot of people know what the organization is all about or even where you're located.
Right. So the location of the farm, Coastal Roots Farm, is on what was originally Ecke Ranch. And as I understand it, going back to the early 20s, 30s, it was around 800 plus contiguous acres. And this is the last 67 acre parcel that was acquired by the Leach-Tag Foundation in 2012. They started the farm as a program of the foundation in 2014. And then 2015, it became its own 501c3 nonprofit. So we're actually in our 8th year now as the nonprofit. But yeah, it's been a little over 10 years since the property was acquired.
What's the mission of Coastal Roots Farm?
Right. So the best way is to frame it around our 4 impact initiatives. So the focus of the farm is around organic regenerative farming, food justice, which I'll be explaining more, which is what we do with the food and making sure everybody has equitable access to food, environmental education, and that is all uplifted through Jewish wisdom and values and creating this welcoming environment for everyone.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. That's a very grand mission.
All those pieces, they all interconnect, which is very cool. And if you want, I can mention kind of each one of those in a little bit more depth. So organic regenerative farming practices, what does that mean? It means like taking care of the soil. And we don't use any harmful fertilizers or pesticides. We are constantly working with the needs of the soil. Different plants pull different nutrients out of the soil. So our crop rotations are really important. We also, as part of our organic regenerative practices, after we finish a crop, what we actually do is we bring in the chickens. So we have about 150 chickens. Okay. And then those chickens are going to go through and they're going to eat the bugs, the insect eggs. They're going to fertilize the soil. They're going to turn and aerate the soil. And then after that process, we'll come through with cover crop, which is like a wheat, barley, vetch, that's going to be pulling nitrogen and nutrients into the soil, because so much of what we've seen is that topsoil has been degraded. And that's because it's aired out, it's tilled, it's lost its nutrients. And what we want to do is keep that microbial world intact. So we plant that cover crop, we'll mow that down a couple times, and then we'll come in with it's called an occultation tarp, which is going to essentially it's blocking out light and it's going to bake down that organic material and let that make its way into the soil. And once we peel that off, we're ready to direct seed and plant. Never have we tilled the soil. That is probably like the top way that you can be farming and caring for the earth and caring for the soil, which in the end result, after those plants grow, is going to be the most nutrient dense produce you can imagine. And when it makes its way into our farm stand, or it goes, which is our pay what you can farm stand, where people can choose and come to the property. And I didn't mention before, it's right there off of Saxony between Encinitas Boulevard and Leucadia. And the property itself actually spans all the way over to Quail Gardens Drive. But right there over Saxony on Thursday, and this gets into the food justice part.
Wait, let's go back a minute on the soil though.
Yeah.
So you took this property over from Ecke. So was the soil not in good shape at all? Because I imagine crops of flowers are different than what you're growing.
Right. So, I mean, and again, the Leach Tag Foundation, acquired the property, and they, the farm is about a third. We're on 17 acres of the 67 acres.
Okay.
So we're, this independent nonprofit organization, about a third of the property. Another third of the property, they set up an incubator, co-working space for nonprofits from a number of different backgrounds, and this kind of programming space where different nonprofit organizations can come together, and there's capacity building and a lot of resources and events and programs that happen there on the property. The foundation's offices are also there on the property. Then the third thing that's happening on the property are all these other agricultural tenants, of which I believe there's around 13 plus, and they're doing all sorts of activities. When the Ecke family sold that property, the flower growing actually went to one of those tenants.
Okay.
And so there's still all this rich agricultural activities going on. I mean, to be honest, it's a pretty exciting space. It feels like a university campus with everything going on. But in terms of going back to specifically the farm, I just think it's important because a lot of people, there's a misunderstanding of the nature of what happens on the property in these different pieces.
Well, we did. We actually had our Moonlight Mixer last week at the Hive, which is what you're talking about, that co-working space.
Exactly.
And what fantastic space that is.
Yeah. And that's a space that really, I think, more and more, nonprofit organizations and community groups can really benefit from utilizing that space in this gorgeous venue, overlooking from there towards the ocean. But more importantly, it's a space that's been really dedicated to uplifting nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, the nonprofit angle is really neat, and just the creativity that goes on, and the mindset that you are, you're all trying to be sustainable. And Nature Unplugged, I know, has a space there. So really being, the tenants teams that fit in with the whole. Vibe of the farm.
Yeah, around nonprofit, around education, around farming and food and agriculture and food systems, around different aspects of Jewish life. So it's a really wonderful place to be. There's always something exciting going on. But yeah.
All right. So the crops, before we even get to the farm stand, what are you guys growing? Yeah.
So, it's into your question of the soil. So it was originally all these greenhouses. So it did take time to, because all the growing that we do is our row crops. So we're planting in the ground, right? So we don't operate in any of the greenhouses.
Okay.
And so, to build up the soil, we are certified organic, CCOF certified. So there's a whole process that you have to go through, I should say, to become organically certified. A lot of people say, we grow organically, but to be organically certified, contract tracing, going through our process, really making sure that everything is being managed in a way that those, pesticides, fertilizers and whatnot are not being detected in the soil. And so we had to do a lot just to build up the soil over a couple of years. To get that certification, but also just to build up to have the rich, bountiful, nutrient-dense food that we have today.
Going back to your chickens, I was at a farm in Byron Bay, Australia. It sounds very much like this. So they have tenants that lease out land to, let's say, keep their chickens, but then the farm uses the chickens, like you said, for fertilizer and things like that. So do you own those chickens, or is that some other tenant?
We do own the chickens, and it's interesting because what you're talking about there is, again, part of our regenerative practices up, in one of the areas of the farm, we have an 8.5 acre food forest. And so the way that works, that agroforestry system, is that we have rows of trees. They're following, perpendicular to the grade of the land, the key line contour of the landscape. And on a berm, there's rows of trees planted. On the uphill side, there's a swale. So that's catching any water erosion that might be happening and letting that water sit and come down into the soil. And then with those rows of trees, between those rows of trees is where you'd have your crops.
Right.
So with the rows of trees in the agroforestry system, we planted initially a lot of elderberry, But there are other fruit trees, and we'll be introducing even more and more. But on the understory, you could be growing other things like different, blackberries or anything of that like. So you can have your canopy, your understory, and then in between, you're growing your crops. And for us, we're cycling our chickens every 2 to 3 weeks through all our different crops. So the chickens do provide eggs that we have in our farm stand, but more importantly, we're in partnership with the chickens, and the chickens are fertilizing the soil. In other places, they could be pasturing, sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, whatever, and bringing animals through. And as I understand it, there are, scenarios where you might have somebody who has livestock, right? And they're working in tandem with a farmer, or the farmer might actually have their own, and then bringing those animals through, or having animals that they've seen in much larger tracts of land, people coming through with their cattle or with their animals. They're not just grazing, they're fertilizing. And so when you can build up that organic matter in the soil, and I'll let those wild grasses grow and build up the richness of the soil, I think what we're doing in terms of regenerative farming on a local level right here in Encinitas is definitely, it's a movement right now in the United States. And I would say like in many parts of the world. And the traditions of the way we're talking about farming and, working with the land, working with the soil is it's not new. It's actually going back to something that was before mechanized farming, before, the harmful fertilizers and pesticides, which have made their way into our food systems and have caused to a lot of unhealthy people, to be honest.
I come from a long line of farmers, and I'm sure they would be unimpressed with my raised flower beds, but at least I'm doing something, or my raised garden beds, but at least I'm doing something. I think I probably could learn a few things at Coastal Roots Farm. So let's get back to the farm stand then. So is that open to the public?
Yeah. So there's 2 ways that we get food out into the community. One way is through our Pay What You Can farm stand that's open Thursday and Sunday. Thursday it's 12 to 3. Sunday it's 10 to 3. And people can come in. They can choose how much they want to pay, up to $30. And the way it works is everything's priced out. So you would choose how much you're going to pay. Or I'm sorry, you would go through and you would pick the things that you want, just like in any farmer's market or grocery store. Everything's priced out. Then when you go to check out, they'd say, okay, this is how much it's worth. And you would be able to deduct up to $30. So if it was $40, you would need to pay $10. If you have EBT, or formerly known as food stamps, you'd be able to actually extend that even farther. But the fact that people, especially people of need, could come twice a week and get in total up to $60 worth of fresh organic produce harvested that morning at peak nutrient density is remarkable. And on Sundays, we have eggs. That's what happens on site. And, it's interesting because being there in Encinitas, in the neighborhood we're at, there's some very nice homes nearby. So we have people coming from all walks of life, right? They're living in these nice homes nearby, and they're also living out of their car. They might be coming from different places around the county. But everybody has this notion of access with dignity, which is really fundamental to the farm, and fundamental, I would say, also to one of those Jewish values and traditions, which is called peah. So in ancient times, people would line the corners and the edges of their fields so people could come by, the hungry, the weary, the traveler, the elder, the sick, could come by and glean food without feeling like they were taking, and they could have access to food, and that's called peah. And here you have our farm stand on the corner and the edge of our property, which is really almost like a modern interpretation of peah. So access with dignity is fundamental, and that carries over to many of our programs too, with scholarships and the way we make our programming accessible.
Right, and I like that. I was down at the Community Resource Center yesterday, and it happened to be people were picking up food from the food pantry, but it was not. It seems like it would be great to get some of those folks down to the Coastal Roots Farm.
Yeah, and we actually so with our produce that's not going through our farm stand, is actually everything going out in the community is 100% donated, and that's made possible through community support and philanthropy. So actually one of the places that we donate produce is also the Community Resource Center.
Okay.
So, the places that are receiving, and they'll actually come to us and pick up produce, being so close, with their vehicle, they'll come pick up produce and take it back to the Community Resource Center. Great partner and great organization. Other organizations that we partner with and communities we serve, again, at no cost, is low income, low enlisted military families, and that's partnering with Helping Hands Worldwide, serving a veteran community. And again, this is also with people coming to the farm stand, but these are very kind of targeted, going out in the community. Vista Community Clinic, which is predominantly Latinx community that we're reaching there. We're a very large percentage of the people reach are seniors, over 25% through all of our different kind of channels of distribution. So we partner with Canterbury Housing, Mercy Housing for low-income seniors nearby. And that's all donated. We also take food every week, every month to the homes of Holocaust survivors in San Diego, which is really wonderful. One of our largest distributions right now is actually partnering with tribal communities. So we're going out to the Ipai Nation of Santa Isabel, which is some of that food's also reaching Mesa Grande, Los Coyotes, and some of the other local communities. And then we also have a distribution going down to the American Indian Health Center in downtown San Diego. And that's not all of them.
Wow.
So,
you're touching so many populations in the greater San Diego County.
Absolutely. And we're our own supply chain, if you think about it, because we're going from propagating from seed all the way to the point of bringing it to the doorstep and bringing it to the people that benefit. So during COVID, if you think about it, because of that food forest coming online, 5 years ago when I arrived at the farm in 2018, at that point, the farm was about 3 years old or so, and now I've been there about 5 years. But at that point, we were maybe distributing around 35,000 pounds of food, and then kind of getting up to like around 40. Last year, it was 86,000 pounds of food, and reaching 86,000 pounds of food, reaching 45,000 people last year. And that's all from a relatively small team, community volunteers, and getting it out there. But during COVID, we were able to grow that much more food at a time of need when, in terms of the meeting the need of the critical sector, which was amazing. And later on, I'll explain the programming side of that. But we were really, really, really happy that we were able to do that.
I was going to say, how did you reach those folks during COVID then? How did you get the word out that you had all this?
People were coming. So we have the farm stand and we have the offsite distribution. We actually didn't stop. I think there was one day, there was a pause, but we didn't stop any of our distributions. We really didn't stop a day, really. I mean, there was one day, but not with our distributions. We quickly pivoted. And you had the staff to manage that? Well, it was interesting because a lot of our staff, we pivoted some of our staff because we lost some of our volunteers. So in terms of out in the fields, everybody jumped in, didn't matter where you were in the organization. We immediately had to stop programming. So it was educators and everybody was involved in jumping into farm tasks. The farm stand, we created a drive-through system. Normally, as I mentioned, you can go through and you can select the items you want. But in that situation, people would fill out almost like a sushi menu. They would fill out a menu of a list of what they'd like, and then we would bag it for them. So again, it's not just a handout, here, take this, this is what you get. They would actually still be able to get to pick, just like they normally do, the items that they want to get. And pick it up. And we would drive through and they would pay and pick it up. But we had a very long walk-up line where people were distancing. And then in the parking lot there, we had a very long line of people that would be coming in early. And then we would make that available. And so we were, prior to COVID, that pay what you can, I think we said that prior to COVID, it was about a third of the people were using the pay what you can. And during and since COVID, it's stayed pretty much 2/3 of the
Okay.
people are using that pay what you can model. So, the farm stand generates revenue for the farm, but it also, more importantly, allows us, with philanthropy, with community support, allows us to just feed, thousands of people each year. And, we're very committed to those partnerships. And all of our offsite distributions, we also started to bag those and make those available.
Talk a little bit about the overarching Jewish traditions and Jewish roots at Coastal Roots Farm.
Yeah, so the Leach Stag Foundation, very much, Jewish community foundation, or Jewish foundation, very much is dedicated, like so many other organizations and philanthropists in San Diego. I think what we've seen very much is that within the Jewish community in general, people are very philanthropic and very caring about helping everyone. There's a notion of welcoming the stranger and about giving back and caring for the whole community. And I think that's just one of the really powerful, beautiful things of that spirit that's come, to the farm, that's embedded in the farm and how we do what we do. So, the values of, like I said, the access with dignity, the welcoming the stranger, the caring for the land. I mean, we talk about Judaism and farming. Like so many traditions, Judaism is heavily based in agriculture in terms of like its calendar, the celebrations throughout the year, and following a lunar calendar, which is also how we harvest and plant our crops. It's become very pivotal. Some of our largest celebrations during the year on the farm, which gets into their programming, is our Sukkot Harvest Festival, which is a time when people would, a time in the fall harvest, right? People would go out to their fields, which were often far from their home, and they would set up what's called a sukkah, and this temporary structure, and they would eat there, and they would pray there, and they'd gather their food. And just like so many cultures and traditions around the world, that time of harvest is hugely celebrated, right? And so too. So, Sukkot is just such a wonderful event that happens at the farm in the fall. And we bring in, last year was like around 1,000 people from all backgrounds, and it's food and music and programming and learning about the farm and everything that we're doing. The other big festival that we have, which was also this year around 1,000 people, is Tu B'Shvat. And that's in around early February. And that's a birthday celebration of the trees. Within Judaism, there's actually like 4 New Years of different purposes. And that's a New Year of the trees and birthday celebration of the trees. And so that's an opportunity to bring people into the food forest, to learn about, how we're caring for the land and stewarding the land. And just, again, another great practice and time. Some other events coming up, which are often referred to as like a celebration of the farmer, a Shavuot. And there's a time when people would bring their first harvests and gift those. But anyways, without going too deep into that, I would just say that the farm is very much guided by what I call the wisdom and the values of how we can care for each other and how we can care for the land, and how we can, do what we say in our tagline, which is nourish community.
It sounds like, it seems like you've done a great way to keep those Jewish traditions, but apply them to the moderate Jewish family, basically, right?
And any family, because we're a Jewish organization. But not necessarily I would refer to as an institution. We're not a synagogue or a Chabad or temple or that sort of thing. There's the notion of land-based Judaism and creating this welcoming environment for peoples of all background. Like so many traditions today, there's so many people, families that are interfaith families, multicultural families. And so for us to create a welcoming space where people of all backgrounds feel welcome and embraced and can connect with the land and connect with each other, that's what we're about.
So is there a way, let's say I could experience the farm as either a program that you might offer, or maybe I wanted to bring my child? Do you have camps? How do we get to experience the
Yeah.
farm?
So, we've been talking a lot about like the food, the farming, and how we embrace these Jewish wisdom and values. And so the fourth major impact initiative, as we refer to it, for the farm is around our educational programming, and it's vast. So this last year, just a high level, we have, or I should say this year, we're planning for about 10,000 youth to come through our programming.
Oh my goodness.
And that's through our school and group visits and our farm camps. Another 5,000 people coming through our community programming and events and the festivals that I mentioned, like Sukkot and Tu B'Shvat and Shavuot and these things. And so we're, roughly programming wise, we're talking about 15,000 people coming through the farm. And I mentioned, last year was feeding around 45,000 people. So, 60, 70,000 people that we're impacting and touching in the community in some way through food or programming. The programs that we do offer, school and group visits. We have youth coming and schools and groups coming from all over the county. Just give me an idea, 1,500, all 1,500 fourth graders are coming from Escondido, all close to 800 or so from Carlsbad, along with pre-K, TK, and so on. We have schools coming from the border, and San Isidro, all the way up to Fallbrook, all the way to inland. And our programs are pre-K through 12th grade. And we offer scholarships. So people say, well, what does that mean? So when a teacher or a group, so it's schools and groups, so it could be a community organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be a school. It could be like a Boys and Girls Club or, any other organization serving youth, pre-K through 12th grade, and they can choose how much they want to, they're able to pay, just like the Pay What You Can farm stand. When they go to sign up and register, and they're picking their program and so on, I'll say, are you needing some kind of scholarship support? And then they click down and they can say, yes, for programs, yes, for transportation.
Okay.
And I'll ask, how much are you able to pay? And what I found is that educators are very, very aware that anything that they can pay and support through their school is going to allow other groups to come and benefit. And that's something, I've learned along the way in setting up. And our farm camps have become widely successful. We set that up, very shortly after I got there and building up the programs. And, this year I think we posted the camps in February, I think, and they were like sold out in a week and a half.
So walk me through a day at camp.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, the kids come, it's funny because we called and say we're going to have about 690 campers there this year, plus our counselors in training, our CITs, plus our team. So it's going to be a really great summer. We refer to our campers as farmers in training. So literally their shirt on the back says farmer in training. And so it's a mix of, the fun and the play with the learning and the doing. So it's everything from gathering and, camp songs and singing and games and that whole side of it, right? That one thinks of with camp. Also, you can only imagine the food, because all of our school and group visits and all of our programs include some element of food, because how could you come to this farm with the most amazing produce and not try the food, the produce? And then there's the farm chores and tasks. So they're as part of their learning, hands-on learning is their learning by doing. So they get to participate in farm chores and activities, but they're all, if you basically took a mashup of like all of our different programs that we offer through school and group programs, the campers are kind of getting the whole lot of it. And they're down on the farm in the main area. They're going up to the food forest. We have a lot of, we're on, again, 17 acres of a 67 acre property. So there's a lot of areas to explore, for us to run our programs. Again, it's they're learning from the cycle of from the planting, the harvesting, to the care of the chickens, to, with the harvesting, obviously it's the preparing of food, So the health and the wellness and the nutrition all gets to be a part of
And
that.
they'll leave camp basically with some skills.
Real skills.
Yeah.
Not just that, like kids come away from camp. I mean, they're learning about compost. They're learning about caring for the environment. They're learning about eating healthy. And I would say from, there's a lot of kids that go back and they go home and they're kind of educating their parents.
Making some changes.
In their families' lives.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like we could do that. Like we have I didn't even mention it, but we have a whole compost operation, an aerated static pile compost, which is a very large operation that we are able to divert waste from the landfill, that we get dropped off there, and then we're able to go through the process of turning that into this rich soil. So we don't bring in any outside external inputs. We're creating our own soil, but we do have a community compost program where, community members can come and drop off their compost as well.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty nice too.
Right.
I do want to mention that we also have workshops, community events, so many things happening throughout the year. One of the programs and events that's coming up that it's one of my favorite things that happens during the spring, summer, early fall is we have our farm film and music series.
That's what I was going to mention.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to get there last year, but gosh, what a great program. What a wonderful evening.
Yeah, no, it's super great. And I'm very happy to say we just found out that US Bank is also going to be our presenting sponsor this year. So really excited about that. But we're basically, people arrive, they bring their blankets, they bring their chairs, they bring their drink, their food. It's just $10. You can sign up online. And then we have different films that are very kind of environmentally conscious awareness type documentary films, always trying to get newer films and exciting films to share. But we open up with kind of that picnic vibe, live acoustic music, always sunset. It's gorgeous. And then when the sun goes down, then we sometimes we might have a little bit of a panel speaker thing going on, but if not, we jump into the film and it's like you're outdoors. The weather's beautiful, stars overhead, going from sunset to watching the movie under the stars on the farm with this huge inflatable screen. We got a really nice sound system.
Oh, what a wonderful night. How many people about?
We've had, I would say they're probably 100, 150, maybe the most, 200 people coming. We also have a lot of different nonprofits tabling, which is really great because our goal is always to highlight and, rising tide floats all boats. So bring a lot of different organizations in that can share what they're doing locally.
Exposed to the community.
Yeah.
Wow. And what else? So what else? Like that's not enough. What else is going on?
Well, we have, a lot of new programs going on all the time, workshops around gardening you were asking about for your gardening.
Right.
We do offer those types of workshops and programs. We have, also some beautiful spaces where we have a lot of different, groups, private and corporate events and groups coming on the farm for their own kind of mixers and farm to table dinners and events and so on. So if you go to our website, you can get more information about that. We also have a whole new initiative, to be honest, over the last year or two, which is tangential to all this, where it really kind of grew out of community support to start the food distribution within tribal communities and the American Indian Health Center. So it's been really nice over the last year or so. We've been partnering with some local tribal communities, local communities to support growing food and building out garden beds and providing ongoing technical training and support for growing food.
So they're growing their food at
we're supporting to build raised bed gardens and set up irrigation to grow food in the different tribal communities in San Diego. And then the goal is to provide ongoing technical training and support, as well as, just along with all of our programming that happens to come and experience the farm. And then we've also been taking some of our educational programming to the reservations, to the tribal communities. And that's just a real something I'm really excited about. And I feel like that so many there's so much opportunity to partner and with these sovereign nations, of the 18 reservations in San Diego County, and I'm also very passionate about hoping to connect more philanthropy and community to support all the cool things and the needs that are happening in the tribal communities.
Right.
So that's like a whole other thing that we're kind of involved with. But again, I think very much stays true to like those impact initiatives around the farming and how we farm, food justice, environmental education. And again, as I mentioned, guided by the Jewish wisdom and values about how we care for people, and how we nourish each other, how we nourish the land, how we nourish community. And there's a lot of ways to do that.
So you're giving back so much. How can we volunteer? How can we as a greater community, as an individual, help and participate and be part of that message?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I mean, we have our earned revenue and our contributed revenue. So earned revenue, people that are signing up for those camps and they're shopping at the farm stand. It's pay what you can farm stand. I think a lot of times people don't realize that they can shop there as well, and that actually supports the farm. So to come shop at the farm stand, to sign up for our programs, to come to the Farm Film and Music Series, to bring your company's event or private event to the farm. That's all generating really meaningful revenue to support the farm. And I think with all those things, even with the events, people are they're touring, they're getting a tour, they're learning about what we do and how we do it, and just really wanting to make sure it's always very mission aligned and connected to the organization. And then, of course, philanthropically, we have our corporate sponsors and our corporate partners at varied levels. And, we found that, but that's really meaningful because that plays into the other way to support, which is out to also to come volunteer. So we have a lot of our corporate partners who are not just donating, money, but they're also donating their time to come out and volunteer. So many of the things that we've built and how we care for the farm, we have a lot of different community groups, corporate groups that come out and they volunteer, and they really have helped move the needle in big ways at the farm. And of course, philanthropically, again, you can go online, you can financially support that way as an individual, a foundation, a business. And that's extremely meaningful. And, especially during COVID, it was really special the way, for us, it was very meaningful the way people stepped up, stepped in. And I think a lot of nonprofits were probably feeling the same way. They were like, oh my gosh, well, what does this mean? But to see the way San Diego stepped in at that time of need was really moving. Not just for Coastal Roots Farm, but I think across the board, it's pretty powerful. We're very blessed, I think, to be in a community where we have these public private partnerships, and the way we can all kind of work together to elevate impact in our region.
Right. I mean, and that collaboration is really what's making this place so special, and what you're doing so special. So
yeah. Well, one last thing is, we've also done some of these other types of gathering events where we're just bringing the community together. We've, through our network of community partners and philanthropy, we've hosted kind of these quarterly cultivating impact mixers where we're just kind of bringing these different communities together so they can cross-pollinate and they can get to know each other. And, as somebody was sharing the other day, things only get done at the speed of trust. And so, the more we have relationships with each other, the more we know each other, that's how things get done. And it does come from trust and relationships and everything that we do.
Well, I know for one, I'm going to get more involved, and I'm going to make a chamber day, I think, at Coastal Roots Farm. So we'll get all our members and come and work and get educated and contribute and just be exposed to the many, many things that you're doing at Coastal Roots Farm.
That would be awesome. I guarantee you it will not be boring, and it'll be a lot of fun.
All right. And so if people want to find out even more information about Coastal Roots Farm, where should they go?
Just our website, coastalrootsfarm.org. We've got a pretty nice website laid out. It spells out all the ways to experience the farm, all the ways to support the farm. And it's all right there.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. It was great and very educating and inspiring.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsor, Max Lux. Join us again for the next episode of Encinitas Chamber Chat Live. For more information on the Chamber and its activities, please visit encinitaschamber.com.